Good morning and welcome back to Microsoft 365 May. Before we begin, a big thank you to the sponsors who've made this conference possible and to the three fabulous organisers, Megan, Rebecca and Lorian, who've made it run so well. Great job done, we think. Thanks for joining us today and for the second workshop in our series. I'm Amanda Broomhall and I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I now introduce my business partner and co-presenter today, Cairo Walker.
Thanks for the mihi, Amanda. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome from across the ditch, the other part of the bubble, Aotearoa. My tribe is Ngāti Porou, a very peace-loving tribe by all accounts, or maybe we just pick our battles. When I used to visit the marae as a kid, I noticed that the chief only had one paua or abalone shell eye on the large carving in the entranceway. I thought the shell had fallen out and no one had bothered to fix it. As time went on, I learned that my tribe is one of the few where women have speaking rights. One of my ancestors gouged out the chief's eye for the right to speak. So be nice, be constructive, hashtag M365May, code of conduct, or you might invoke my wahine toa, fighting woman. Welcome everyone. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Back to ABCW's fierce warrior woman, Amanda.
Wow, thanks, Cairo. If you tuned in last week, I started the session with a story. This week, I'm going to tell a different type of story, one that I think speaks to good leadership during this pandemic. It's from a global consumer products organisation who have a presence here in Australia. As the COVID crisis started to gain traction, the American-based CEO sent out to everyone in the organisation a set of 3 guiding principles that would guide all decisions made during the crisis. The first principle, above all, was personal safety before profit. The CEO assured staff that they and their families came before sales, meaning that the highest priority was ensuring their work safety. Getting sales staff off the roads, reorganising how manufacturing was resourced, transitioning customer service staff into their own homes. The second principle was protection of cash flow. No discounts for large orders, no deliveries if payments were in arrears for whatever reason, things that would normally have been acceptable. It was about protecting the organisation's cash position. The third principle was containing costs. No recruitment, no travel, minimal expenses, and even bringing some outsourced functions back in-house. These 3 principles have underpinned every decision managers have made over the past few months. And I mention this story because I thought it was a great example of strong, decisive, and empathetic leadership reflecting a culture that focuses on their staff. I thought it was a really nice lesson. Just to fill you in, if you missed last week's session, we introduced a 4-step framework for evaluating the lockdown period and planning the organisational journey out the other side. To recap, there are 4 steps in this journey. Firstly, taking a baseline of where the organisation was before lockdown. Secondly, researching the lockdown experience and gathering the learnings, and that's what we'll be focusing on today. The planning step, where we turn all those learnings into actions, and then a final step of looking at what is required to move to the new normal. We also set the first bit of homework, which was about gathering together and reviewing a set of strategic documents to provide a picture of where the organisation was at when this COVID business began. Documents such as strategic plans, departmental plans, approved project lists, sales targets, SWOTs, etc. If you want to revisit this session from last week, you can. You can see the recording on YouTube, or you can go to the blog section on the ABCW website where we have information and resources there. For those of you who did participate last week, I hope you had a chance to gather and review those documents. By Being familiar with them, you'll be better able to assess the changes and the impacts of those changes as we work through the framework. Just a note, if you've got any questions, please feel free to add questions in the chat for this session. We'll try and get to them at the end, but we've got a lot of material, so we might have to get back to you on them. Okay, so this week, we are looking at the second step in the framework, which is all about researching the organisational experience of lockdown, exploring the changes and identifying the lessons learned. We've created a set of topics that we think would be valuable for you to explore, and we suggest some tools for undertaking that research. We are actually splitting this research step into two parts. Today, we're going to look at the information collection activities, and then in the session next week, we'll look at some of the tools for analysing and making sense out of the information and the data that you collect. So as we all know, the world changed a couple of months ago as we went into lockdown. The impacts of this event has differed from industry to industry and organisations to organisations. So much happened so quickly. IT departments scrambled to set staff up to work from home. Staff had to adjust to working alongside kids and dogs, and management had to make rapid decisions on how their businesses would respond to the changes. Some of these changes caused varying degrees of stress. Others were met with determined resolution. And I must say that Kyra and I have heard some great stories recently about organisations and people rising well to the challenges. We need to capture what happened during lockdown. What did we learn? What were the positives and the negatives? It's essential we keep track of these things. So from a research perspective, to get a good picture of what happened to our organisations, we suggest that there are a number of factors to consider in your research. We've identified probably around 20 topics to explore, which I realise is quite a lot. So it's likely that the research you undertake will be reasonably light touch. You'll skim over some of these topics. No doubt you will have individual departments within your organisations who will look in more depth at their own areas. But the intention of this exercise is to take that light touch across the whole of the organisational experience. We've grouped these topics into 6 categories. Now, some of these topics may be more or less relevant to your particular organisation than others, but I think with some creative variation, I'll give you an idea of what needs to be looked at. Now, I have to say that over the last couple of weeks, Kyra and I have met with a range of different organisations, virtually, of course, and we've actually been running through this activity at a high level with them. And it's worked really well, and we've gathered, even from simple 1-hour interviews, some really fascinating feedback from them. So I would expect that from within your organisations, you're going to be able to get so much more detail and some great stories. Definitely worth capturing. So let's look at each of these categories and the topics within them in a bit more detail. So the first category that we look at is strategy. What were the strategic decisions initially made to meet that lockdown? Could everyone work from home? Did people work in offices or were they in factories? Did they have to change shift arrangements? Did you have staff who had to continue to work in the community, delivering healthcare or home services, etc.? We really need to get a bit of a picture of what was the strategic decisions made at that point. Next, what were the external factors that impacted how your organisation reacted? Now, firstly, what were the government decisions that were relevant to you? Always, what were the regulations? And they may differ from organisation to organisation. What was happening with your customers or your clients or patients that may have impacted their ability to deal with you in their usual manner? How was your supply chain impacted? Could you get the products, the materials you needed to continue to work? And of course, there's always contracts in play with organisations, contracts with suppliers or customers or other third parties. What were the implications for some of those agreements during this period? Did things have to be changed? Did we have to renege on contracts? We need to be thinking about these things because there will be some key things there moving forward in terms of reviewing contracts in the future. The next set of questions are around the corporate departments or supporting functions. Some of these will be really clear and obvious. You know, what were the implications of working from home for HR? Thinking about matters of occupational health and safety and risk. And we've already spoken to a number of organisations where HR are scrambling to reflect working from home in their policies, which they didn't have previously. What were the impacts on how the finance department went about their business? And what were the challenges for IT? How digitally prepared was the organisation? And for the facilities blokes and girls, does anyone know where those desks went? The next section is questions relating to the core business. What were the impacts on your core function? Was there an impact on sales or your ability to deliver the services that you deliver? If you were manufacturing, could that continue? Did you have to change what you were manufacturing? And what happened with customer service? What changes did you need to make for that? The next section is about the culture of the organisation. How did the pre-existing culture of the organisation influence the response to the lockdown? And has this event impacted the culture in any way? I think these are quite interesting questions, and it's probably very valuable to get maybe a range of opinions from around the organisation. Our final grouping is how was the whole experience for our staff? Now, this is something probably your HR departments will already be considering, but we still think it's incredibly valuable even just to do a short, sharp survey right now to collect the opinions and stories from staff themselves around how they have found the whole experience. Cairo and I have actually created a draft survey for you that we'll make available for you later this morning, and that will be available on our website. It'll be accessible via the YouTube video or by the videos that's available, or later on we'll give you our personal contact details and you can contact us about it. So we've created a survey, or it's a draft survey with a series of questions that you can take and then build into your own survey tool, which might be SurveyMonkey or whatever tool that you use. We've deliberately kept the question numbers low so as not to intimidate staff and increase the possibility of actually getting some good responses. And the questions just simply look at what did the changes mean for their role, what were the challenges of working from home, exploring what both the positives and the negatives were of that experience, and what would they like to see continue in the future. Okay, so they're the topics that we think are very valuable to explore at this point in time. Now, some of you will be able to answer those research questions yourself. You might well be in a position to answer them. My guess is that most of you will not be able to talk to all of those topics, however, so you will have to engage others in your organisation to get that information. Now, in terms of doing any sort of research like this, there's always a myriad of methods that you might use, but we selected several techniques that will be of most use to you. Firstly, the surveys I've just mentioned, which is good, okay for getting limited information, but from a wide range of people. Individual interviews are obviously best for information-rich discussions. You just can't do many of them, but they do allow you to delve into a particular topic or aspect of the research. You might also find that it's worth doing a bit of a workshop or a facilitated discussion where you might get a group of people talking about different aspects of one of the questions. Always good to share insights in that sort of forum as well. And finally, always worth gathering a few stats from this particular experience. You know, let's look at the website. What were your customers looking for? How were your staff using your intranet? All valuable information to your research. I recommend you take time to document your research or even record some of the discussions that you have. What you get out of these sessions will be important for others in the organisation as well as for capturing organisational history as it is happening. Now, while the competition slide pops up, I just want to say out of this research, we will be wanting to answer some of the big questions in time. And the questions might be, how prepared was our organisation for working remotely? Was the digital infrastructure in place? How did people overcome the challenges of working from home? What hacks were put in place, and do they need to be reversed or enshrined going forward? And my favourite question, where was the traditional bureaucracy of your organisation ignored, and did it matter? It's probably a bit of a cheeky one, that one. Okay, so what happens next week? Well, next week we're into part 2 of the research component, and we're going to look at how to make sense of all the information that you gather during the collection phase, so what we've talked about today. We have a few tools that we think will help convey the lessons learned in an easy manner. So we're absolutely encouraging you to come along next session, same time next week, to learn some more. Cairo, do you have anything to add to that at this point?
Just to say that next week, we would love you guys to do some research over the week and come with some of that in your head, but you don't really need to bring anything next week. We'll share a couple of tools, as Amanda said, to make sense of things. So the main thing is just to come along, you know, and bring your manager or bring some of the people that you've interviewed. Let them see how we're going to make sense of this and how we're moving through things.
Great, thanks. So I'm looking at the time, and yes, again, we've packed too much into our 15 minutes. So if there's been some questions in the chat there, I'm sorry we haven't got to them. We will review them now and we'll answer them either on our blog or maybe we can even contact you directly. Don't be shy, please contact us during the week. We're really keen to hear your stories. We think there is so much interesting information coming out of this whole event, but it's not only just interesting, it's really valuable for shaping your organisations moving forward. Thank you for your time today.
We'd also welcome feedback on the tools. We've put things together that we think will be very succinct, helpful, to the point, and so any feedback on those, we would welcome that also.
Great. Thanks very much.